The person he selects is not a person. So if you want to find out, please read the newsletter. Uh, with that, I would like to invite Navneet on the stage.
Thank you. Good to be back in person for our Value Investing Pioneers Conference, one of our marquee events. Lord Mahavir said, a living body is not merely an integration of limbs and flesh, but it is the abode of the soul, which potentially has perfect perception, perfect knowledge, perfect power, and perfect bliss. That's Anand Darshan, Anand Gyan, Anand Virya, Anand Sukh. Lord Mahavir's message reflects freedom and spiritual joy of the living being. It's such an honor for me today to introduce a person, or should I say an institution, who's a perfect example of how Lord Mahavir explained a living body. Vallabh Bhai needs no introduction, and it will be so difficult for me to say the things that he's done or he's been doing, but I'll just touch upon few things and then we'll have a freewheeling conversation. So he's been one of the great thought leaders of India, man of varied interest, and there are so many facets of his life. I mean, other than investing, investment banking, where he created an institution called INAM, but the number of things that he has done over the years and where he's involved, his interest in behavioral finance and economic and national development, social development of the country, and of course scientific spirituality, where we'll spend a lot of time during the conversation. He co-founded the institution called INAM, which went on to become the leading investment banking institution in India, and under his able leadership and the outstanding team that he built over the years, executed some of the most innovative and pioneering capital markets and advisory transactions in the country. We'll be discussing about several of those. INAM has played a significant role in the development of leading business houses in India, such as Infosys, Reliance, Sterlite, Thermax, many more. We'll be discussing few of those transactions, that whole era of 80s, 90s, 2000s. And even government companies such as NTPC, PTC, PFC. We had a very interesting conversation about the whole divestment program of the during the Vajpayee government this morning. He's a chartered accountant and of course a rank holder, and has a degree in law, gold medalist in law. Among his many honors is a doctorate from Tirthankar Mahavir University. The most interesting part, we invited him for a talk some time back. The most interesting part was during his CA days, he hardly studied what the CA, I would say, curriculum or syllabus is. He read many, many books while pursuing CA, which is very difficult. All the chartered accountants that I hire, and when I say what you're reading currently, he says, sir, time hi nahi hota hai. When you are doing CA, how can you read something else? But he's, as I said, a different person. He anchored a popular TV show, Kaun Hai Bharat Bhagya Vidata, which was focused on reviving volunteerism and patriotism in the country. I requested him today, I think we should restart the series again. He's also a founder director of Flame University, an innovative liberal arts university, one of the finest in India. Today only I came to know our beloved Professor Bakshi is now closely involved, and of course with VIP, as each one of you know, he's been one of our guiding light, and he's there in Flame University. We'll discuss about that as well. He's the founder and chief mentor of Desh Apnaye Sahayog Foundation, which is focused on instilling a sense of active citizenship among school and college students, as he calls Actizens. Satya Vigyan Foundation, another of his creation, is focused on bringing to light India's unmatched heritage and knowledge in a modern metaphor. He was instrumental in completing and distributing a much acclaimed film, History of Yoga, and more such films are in the works. He inspired a course on Samakatva, or right knowledge, as the foundation of spiritual progress, which is receiving great response from Jains across the country. He is a trustee and its former chairman of the Global Vipassana Foundation, something that we'll be discussing today, and the relevance of it for all the investors. He was a trustee of the Bombay Stock Exchange. He has served on several policy making and advisory committees of the central government and other regulatory bodies. He's on the board of directors of many reputed companies. So we'll discuss a broad range of topics. It will be a freewheeling discussion, and please keep sending your questions the way you have been sending in the earlier sessions as well. So with that note, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Vallabh Bhanshali. So first of all, thank you so much for accepting this. This is the moment that we have been waiting for several years. I know several times in the last couple of years we would have sent this request for this conference, for another one that my colleagues do in Calcutta, Masters at Work. And invariably we found that you were out for a 10, 20, or 30 days Vipassana course, or you were out in villages in Maharashtra doing some work on water or something or the other. But finally we made this happen, so we are extremely, I would say, grateful to you.
My pleasure, and I'm sorry for being very difficult, but
No, not really, but it's just I think you've been such an inspiration for all of us. And in CFA Society, we relate a lot to you. We look up to you because we strongly believe, and all the volunteers who are sitting here, those who are giving back to the profession and working on advocacy, working on giving back to the society, we strongly believe finance must be for the ultimate good of society. These words are part of our mission statement. Finance must be for the ultimate good of society. And your life is like, I would say, an epitome of how to devote a life for the larger good of the society. You built an outstanding institution called INAM. Everybody has been looking up to it for several years. You've seen the whole 80s, the liberalization, the new India, and over the years it has progressed. I think what I'll try to do in next 1.5 hours is to speak as less as possible, and we give it to you so that whichever way you want to take it, I think you can start from your early days, the journey of building INAM, and then at some stage why you decided maybe to leave INAM and do something else. And I think we just take it from there, maybe the early life that you had.
So, well, I thank you very much for having me here. And not all that much, I must tell you, because I don't like to come make public appearances now. But to see so many friends while I was sitting there, that is very heartening. And if I feel that I've been useful, of course, I'll be very happy. But I have tremendous fondness, respect, regard, and I get inspired by man sitting at my left. And it was so difficult for me to say no when I had that little window of time. It's just that because of the various things I put on my plate, I find it very difficult to come out. I mean, the more I think of my life, the more that one thought that just keeps coming to me is how fortunate I have been. And it may seem, just being polite, but that's not the case. I mean, tears come easily to me when I think of the kind of good things that have happened to me. To be born in a economically middle-class family, but in terms of values, the highest possible class of family. So my father means a lot to me. I lost my mother when I was young. And an aunt lived with us. She was living with us earlier, and she wanted probably to move out, but she stayed with us for 9 years. And I was 13, my brother was younger. Now, that meant so much to me. So I feel so lucky that even if I lost my mother, I had somebody. My siblings, my elder brother Manik Bhai, you may not have known much, but there are a lot of people in the market who looked up to him. He was everything to me. To have a guardian in him, a parent in him, a hero in him. My sister, So I can go on. So my life is full of all these wonderful people who happen to be in my life, showering their affection, guidance on me. I went to Sydenham College. I actually went to a Hindi medium government school. My primary education was a Hindi medium and in a government school. And then my uncle thought that I was bright enough to shift to English school. And I went to an English school, 8th standard onward. It was a big change. But somehow, one feeling that has remained with me throughout is, I'm inferior to none. Whether I may be superior to anyone, but so I'm going to make up. And that drive, I think, has continued in me that if there is some standard that I think I should meet, I will strive for it even today with the same spirit I did way back when I was 11, 12 years old. So lucky breaks of that kind, someone inspiring me, someone helping me, happened throughout. Something extraordinary happened when I passed my BCom exam, or I was waiting for my BCom exam results. I was in a state of mind, and I talked about my father. He had a vast collection of books at home. And he never had much formal education, but he was a very learned man. And he had read almost all the books that he had collected. And they were across literature, religion, Mahabharata. Because of that, I had read the fat Mahabharata twice before I was 12 years old, 12 or 13 years old. So that kind of habit, and then I picked up Srimad Bhagavad Gita, commentaries on Gita by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. That was transformational for me. And so, you talked about studying, reading other books in CA. That just happened soon after my BCom examination. And it was so transformational, I felt that an energy explosion had happened in me. And what I took away from Gita was truth. It's not something that will be said commonly, that people take away detachment, people take away sense of duty and so on, but I took away truth. And my truth at that point of time was I was expecting better results than I deserved. And as I read the book, I said, wow, what can be more miserable than that expectation? And that kind of taught me the value of excellence. Yoga karma su kaushalam is like one of the principles, well-known principles that Gita teaches. And yoga karma su kaushalam, that my yoga is becoming excellent and nothing else. And that made things so easy for me afterwards. Throughout CA, I thought, who will fail me in CA? Let me see. And therefore, it just gave my mind so much freedom to read. I don't know, I'm reading at least 50 books a year while I was doing my CA and law together, and I was a very active article clerk. So, these are lucky breaks that I've had throughout my life. One other incident that I would like to quote is that this sense of purpose, sense of honesty, though I was a high ranker, law, CA, etc., I was very much appreciated in my partnership. I didn't feel that I was a chartered accountant at heart. And I was struggling. My health started deteriorating. For months, I could not go to office. It was so bad. And then I wanted to do good to somebody else. So I dragged him to a lecture by someone who could influence life. I said, iska bhala ho jayega. But if I didn't go, he wouldn't go, so let me just go along with him. By the public appearances now. But to see so many friends while I was sitting there, that is very heartening. And if I feel that I've been useful, of course, I'll be very happy. But I have tremendous fondness, respect, regard, and I get inspired by man sitting at my left. And it was so difficult for me to say no when I had that little window of time. It's just that because of the various things I put on my plate, I find it very difficult to come out. I mean, the more I think of my life, the more that one thought that just keeps coming to me is how fortunate I have been. And it may seem, just being polite, but that's not the case. Tears come easily to me when I think of the kind of good things that have happened to me. To be born in a economically middle-class family, but in terms of values, the highest possible class of family. So my father means a lot to me. I lost my mother when I was young. And an aunt lived with us. She was living with us earlier, and she wanted probably to move out, but she stayed with us for 9 years. And I was 13, my brother was younger. Now, that meant so much to me. So I feel so lucky that even if I lost my mother, I had somebody. My siblings, my elder brother Manik Bhai, you may not have known much, but there are a lot of people in the market who looked up to him. He was everything to me. To have a guardian in him, a parent in him, a hero in him, my sister. So I can go on. So my life is full of all these wonderful people who happen to be in my life, showering their affection, guidance on me. I went to Sydenham College. I actually went to a Hindi medium government school. My primary education was a Hindi medium and in a government school. And then my uncle thought that I was bright enough to shift to English school. And I went to an English school, 8th standard onward. It was a big change. But somehow, one feeling that has remained with me throughout is, I'm inferior to none. Whether I may be superior to anyone, but so I'm going to make up. And that drive, I think, has continued in me that if there is some standard that I think I should meet, I will strive for it even today with the same spirit I did way back when I was 11, 12 years old. So lucky breaks of that kind, someone inspiring me, someone helping me, happened throughout. Something extraordinary happened when I passed my BCom exam, or I was waiting for my BCom exam results. I was in a state of mind, and I talked about my father. He had a vast collection of books at home. And he never had much formal education, but he was a very learned man. And he had read almost all the books that he had collected. And they were across literature, religion, Mahabharata. Because of that, I had read the fat Mahabharata twice before I was 12 years old, 12 or 13 years old. So that kind of habit, and then I picked up Srimad Bhagavad Gita, commentaries on Gita by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. That was transformational for me. And so, you talked about studying, reading other books in CA. That just happened soon after my BCom examination. And it was so transformational, I felt that an energy explosion had happened in me. And what I took away from Gita was truth. It's not something that will be said commonly, that people take away detachment, people take away sense of duty and so on, but I took away truth. And my truth at that point of time was I was expecting better results than I deserved. And as I read the book, I said, wow, what can be more miserable than that expectation? And that kind of taught me the value of excellence. Yoga karmasu kaushalam is like one of the principles, well-known principles that Gita teaches. And yoga karmasu kaushalam, that my yoga is becoming excellent and nothing else. And that made things so easy for me afterwards. Throughout CA, I thought, who will fail me in CA? Let me see. And therefore, it just gave my mind so much freedom to read. I don't know, I'm reading at least 50 books a year while I was doing my CA and law together, and I was a very active article clerk. So, these are lucky breaks that I've had throughout my life. One other incident that I would like to quote is, that this sense of purpose, sense of honesty, though I was a high ranker, law, CA, etc., I was very much appreciated in my partnership. I didn't feel that I was a chartered accountant at heart. And I was struggling. My health started deteriorating. For months, I could not go to office. It was so bad. And then I wanted to do good to somebody else. So I took him, I dragged him to a lecture by someone who could influence life. I said, iska bhala ho jayega. But if I didn't go, he wouldn't go, so let me just go along with him. By the tea session of that one-day seminar, I said, well, I found my master again. After Vinobaji, I found my master. And then, I took him as a master in my life. And I asked him that, look, I'm suffering, so what should I do? He said, you don't like being a CA? I said, I don't like it at all. He said, leave. I said, leave? He said, leave. I left. I didn't think twice about it. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I quit my chartered accountancy practice. I tore up my certificate. I'm never going to be a chartered accountant. I think meeting someone like that and then having that courage that it doesn't matter what I'm going to do next, I'm not going to do this. As they say, burnt my boats, burnt my bridge, and the rest is history, as they say. So all my fondness for reading, wanting to do good to others, etc., brought me into the investment profession. And again, my brother was instrumental, who proposed that, look, you're so good at understanding things beyond the obvious, you should be doing investment analysis. Then I became one of the earliest analysts in the country. And then NM got founded, and I met my most wonderful partner now for 40 years, friend, family. So these are all the lucky breaks that kept happening. And then it happened to be the right time, the right place, the stock market. My father was rather worried because he had lost money in speculation at one point of time, and he said, are you going to stock market? But he was a very wise man, and he saw that when I talked to him that I have done analysis, I've studied like this. And he said, okay, beta, dhyan rakhna, and go. And then, to meet a partner who had skill, courage, values, and then it became a formidable, combination that we had energy, we had this love for knowledge, and we entered a market where if you knew the capital of the company, it was research. In 82, 83, people didn't get annual reports. People were speculating massively, but didn't know anything about the company. So, how little things can become a huge advantage in your life, I've seen throughout. So that's my journey before I became an investment banker. And then we didn't start as an investment banker. We were there to make money, very plain and simple. And we thought that we had certain advantage, so let's take that advantage. But soon, we were actually good at new issues, mobilizing demand, becoming underwriters. I saw a big gap in the market that, a lot of companies are coming out, they need good advice. We have a vision about businesses, and so why not we develop investment banking seriously? And then I put my heart into developing an investment bank and been very lucky with it.
Much more than lucky at it. You created an outstanding institution. You created outstanding businesses for the country. You brought the first IT company, Infosys, and I think the IPO bombed. The legend is that I think some of the investors like you had to bail out the IPO. And today, this year, India's IT exports have overtaken India's crude imports. What an industry that has got built over the last 30 years. How would you see that? So while studying, while maybe, of course, you have a great perspective about history, but I think specifically about India, before your INAM days, you saw so many of these newer businesses that we talked about. You can idea, a variety of other businesses, whether it's media, pharmaceuticals, IT, so many of the businesses to see the potential. But I'm sure you would have that sense of history and what's coming in the future. And also like recognizing some of the people who can make that happen and then selling that to a potential investor. Maybe if you can take us through that, I would say a worldview that you had, the view about India you had and how it kind of evolved. Some of these specific stories will come in a few minutes time. I think the India, the way from 15th August 1947, the way you saw it from the time you started a business, the gap you saw, and then you tried to fill in rest in history.
It's a subject that you are pointing at, and so I hope I don't become too expansive and make some sense. So when you...
They're all quality investors, so they pay as long as there is great quality, so they will pay anything for that.
Yeah, so...
Prof has taught us so much.
Actually, when I came into the room, I was very conscious. I said, these are all wonderful analysts. I may have been amongst the earliest analysts and done whatever in the name of analysts. But today I'm more a philosopher, so I don't know how useful I will be to you. But so please pardon me, my worldview has changed so much. But when you start your life, where you had read Mahabharata twice in your by the time you became a teenager, and you had values practiced at home, this consciousness about how values matter had become like it was a given for us. It was not to be studied in books or something. And then when I was an auditor, I saw practices. I saw when I was a chartered accountant, an article clerk between 71 and 75, and that period, how though number was absolutely accepted. How stealing from the government was absolutely accepted. So I called it the grab era. So the 70s and the 80s were grab era because we had made resources so out of reach for others. There was hardly any resource creation. So you'll all know about the socialist policies and so on. And then I saw the greed era. So, in that grab era, I had the good fortune to be friendly with Mr. Chandrakant Sampath, who's a legend. I don't know if your institute has ever done anything about, but Parag Parikh's office, I'm sure, is involved. And he was so kind to us and gave so much time. And so we invested in some of his companies and started understanding that, there is a way of building serious businesses. But he was a great MNC fan. But in India, I saw that there were very few people who really had access to what is called a business protocol, a business manual. So the rest were all trying their hands. That's how we had either very small businesses, intermediaries, and a few industrial houses. Some of them were legit houses, like I wouldn't mention about the others, but they were the Kasturbai Lalbais, the Kirloskars. Some of them had high vintage, and they had a good understanding of business. So otherwise, it was a grab era. And then come 80s, capital markets started to grow, and Dhirubhai's great contribution of creating market cap, talking growth, etc., and era of greed started, which probably overlapped into the 90s because people didn't believe, and I'll give you my own example. So, while we were research, comparative, relatively investors, we never forget the greatness of Vinod Sethi. I don't know if you...
No, we had him. Thanks
You
to
had him.
Bhave.
Durgesh was telling me
Last year
that...
we got, I mean, in the last in-person conference 2 years back, we had Vinod Sethi and Durgesh Bhai was gracious to moderate that session. Yeah.
In 1988 or so, when he started this partnership with SBI, and he started understanding the potential of India, and we had a lot of quality stocks, and how when he started buying them at 20%, 30% premium, we thought this guy, and how we felt that, nothing like this can happen, this is all wrong, how greedy we felt about it. But we learned. So I saw this grab world change to greedy world, and something very unfortunate happened. But a lot of fortunate things happened in the 90s. And I have this kind of narrative of that greed, grab, greed, growth, and greatness. Over the last...
Grab, Then we had, so
Greed.
maybe that 60s, 70s till maybe mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
Then we
Some
got
of it,
that.
these are not like watertight periods,
Yeah.
but that overlap into 90s. For example, in 90s, the GDRC started. When the foreigners came, how Indians, found bankers, and I wouldn't mention, there were some very special bankers who could be, caught, who could be hired, and, they could place a stock. And there was an instrument called GDR, Global Depository Receipts, and bulk of those global depository receipts remained underwater. Some of them vanished along with the vanishing companies. So that greed, that all this cannot last, all this capital market talk, etc., is nonsense and not to be believed in, and let's take advantage of it. That continued in the 90s. In the 80s, of course, we had mega issues. The way you do not remember, but there were Larsen to Bro, Usha Rectifier, Oswald, some of those houses that were champions at raising capital. So this opportunity that, okay, you grabbed from the system, then you grabbed from the market, so that grab becoming greed. And it was only Mr. Narayan Murthy in the 90s who came out with a public manual of wealth creation. That what is some corporate governance, what does wealth creation mean, what participation of employees, what does caring for shareholders mean, etc. And he gave out openly. And he launched 1,000 ships. And a lot of those ships were younger people who learned from him, who were inspired by him. I was a party to a lot of, the Harsh Mariwala's stories and subsequent stories. So when in the 90s, the market opened up from this grab and greed, it was systematic that, okay, resources are free. If you can raise them, you can import whatever technology. These are momentous changes which we cannot appreciate unless you lived in both the eras. And contribution of Mr. Narayan Murthy, that what economic reforms means, what does responsible capital raising mean, he taught this country. So you may not know that the bulk of corporate reporting reform was brought by one company, Mr. Narayan Murthy and Mr. Mohandas Pai, that we need to audit results, we need to give half-yearly results, we need to give quarterly results, we need to give balance sheet and whatnot, and what a balance sheet should look like. He was, of course, the chairman of the corporate governance committee of SEBI and brought a lot of reforms. So what contribution one man like a Dhirubhai can do, or what a Narayan Murthy can do, and what each one of you can do, I mean, this is what I have seen. In the 90s, another person who made this growth possible, and that came to the scene of India. So Mr. Narasimha Rao probably did not have any great contribution to the growth story, but he started the possibility of growth by just getting out of the way of Indians. Amongst the most learned politician was Mr. Narasimha Rao, and he understood the value of freedom. But it was Mr. Vajpayee whose contribution is not much recognized. He had a 13-day government, then he had a 13-month government, and then he had a 4.5-year government. So totally he was there for about 6 years. And he had the nuclear explosion, he faced the Kargil war, he faced the Asian crisis. The interest rates were 17, 18%. We were talking about an ex-colleague about Nageshwar Rao at IDBI and how we used to do flexi bonds. And I have had fights, I won't mention the institutions, but all the institutions used to raise bond at 15%, 16%, 17%, because resources is not available. And I said, as an institution, you are committing to 7-year, 10-year money to investors. How the hell will you return the money? I feel I can't underwrite, and at least one institution I stopped. I did not underwrite there, and they took some 9 months to reconsider. Eventually they issued because everyone else was issuing. So from that era, I remember having a meeting with Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was a part of the Vajpayee government, and saying that what happens if we bring down the interest rates? And then the interest rates were reset in the late 90s, post-Asian crisis. They recognized that it was possible. Maybe because the era was inflationary and that we would have to cheat on savers because you bring down interest rates, the savers get a negative interest rate, but they had to reset. Not only that, the corporates were in severe stress. I won't mention, but one of the houses that we were a big part of building, he had over leveraged and he said, Vallabh bhai, मैं party में जाना बंद कर दिया, शादी में नहीं जाता हूँ, I can't show my face because I'm so over leveraged. There were several houses like that. And then they did what was called the corporate debt restructuring, that they found a very equitable way of resetting the debt. So he rehabilitated the banks, he rehabilitated the corporate India, and then of course the telecom reform, the infrastructure reform, the power vision and whatnot.
We
So,
also witnessed, I mean, the 2000 tech bust, 9/11, a 3-year global slowdown from 2000 to 2003. It was a tough period
absolutely.
in global economy.
Since you mentioned it, look at the two crises that happened in the first decade. 2001, the tech bubble burst, and terrible things happened in the world and markets and so on. And how government of India reacted at that point of time. We had a brilliant governor in Reserve Bank of India, Bimal Jalan, followed by then another brilliant person, Y.V. Reddy. And then what happened in 2008 crisis? How different were the responses and how the response in 2008 created great difficulty. We took almost 8-9 years to come out of that difficulty, which was started in 2008-9. So what the contribution of one man. So Vajpayeeji was extraordinary saga. And then of course, last but not the least was the divestment and public sector issues. So I was a party to, working with Mr. Arun Shuri, and again, an extraordinary person. We made 7 issues in 7 weeks. This is against all merchant banking history, that you have to go to the same investors and they are going to weigh how will you, invest in A and B and C and D all together. And so we all merchant bankers, some 8-9 of us, decided that we will meet the government and tell them, look, it is just impossible. We have to do it over a longer period of time. So we went to Mr. Arun Shuri, I don't remember, he came to our room or whatever. So he said, he heard us, मैंने सुना आप लोग के पास बहुत कुछ कहने को कहे. So we all made our pitch for 20-25 minutes. Then he says, ठीक है, आपसे नहीं हो सकता. So we said, we didn't know where he was coming from. He said, looks very difficult, sir. He said, ठीक है, आप नहीं कर सकते तो जाइए. We all surrendered. All the issues went through. That was the kind of leadership, decision making. He said, do whatever you want to. You want to reduce price, you want to combine issues, this, that, etc. So, this period of growth shaped by Mr. Narayan Murthy, some of the other companies, maybe, we played a bit of a role in, bringing those growth-oriented companies like Z and so many others. And then we saw the change in Reliance. I think it's an extraordinary change that Mukesh Ambani brought. Reliance of the 80s and the Reliance of the 90s, they're completely different entities, and I worked with both. So I think Mukesh Ambani's capability to see things 20, 30 years ahead is extraordinary. The two people who always, gave me nerves if I had to meet them, one of them was Mukesh Ambani and one of them was Mr. Narayan Murthy. You never knew, and to date you never know what these people will expect of you. And Mukesh could be talking about small media in 98. That, Vallabh, what do you think, So he could see that people will be watching movies and short content on mobile in 98 when he did not have a mobile company. 1998. And so he would talk things like that. To give you the measure of the man, so after the brothers split, so while they were together, it was always the younger brother who led all the capital market transactions. He was the face. The strategy was all joint, etc., but he was the face. After they split, Reliance Petroleum IPO had to be done. No reason for Mukesh Ambani to be nervous, but his drive for excellence was so high. So he said, Vallabh, I need time, because I had organized an analyst big group meet in Jamnagar. And then, he showed me the presentation. I said, Mukesh bhai, ye sab jaruri nahi hai. He said, no. He had a 30-year perspective on refinery business. That what is going to be the nature of energy consumption and what are the kinds of energies that are necessary and how this refinery is going to take on whatever, etc. So I think we have all benefited from some individuals, the huge capabilities. One person I mention with great respect is Mr. C.B. Bhave, the dematerialization, that against all odds he led the dematerialization. So I've seen this growth phenomenon. But the most interesting part of this journey is that as the grab and the greed era went by, and because now we had tighter regulation, one of the institutions that got built by a crisis was Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India cut an I was a part of the institution, and so I say it with all due humility, that it was caught sleeping in the Harshad Mehta scam. A lot of people like to believe that it was not a stock market scam, it was a securities market scam. But the way Reserve Bank of India responded to it and put its house in order and became probably, I think, the finest professional institution in the country today, having worked with Reserve Bank of India, is the Reserve Bank of India. So, as we came into, because of better regulation, Mr. D.R. Mehta's long stint at SEBI, the SEBI got fixed, that we are beneficiaries of. Now we have a growth paradigm. The world has looked at India in a derogatory manner or looked down upon India. A lot of them continue to look down upon India, increasingly less. A lot of Indians look down upon India because probably we are not looking at India's change, in my view, in a correct manner. In 30 years, from 91 to 2022, what has India achieved? See, we all go through as a child a phase, right? I mean, we have our phases. A first child is not given freedom. Then you get freedom through teenage, college age, whatever, etc. Then you get exposure. You can get carried away by exposure, but you get confidence. Then you have the right ambition or the wrong ambition. And then ambition is just a spontaneous reaction to what you have seen. It gives you stars that I will do this and I will do that. Then you get maturity. And then you make a systematic, proper plan for life. So by the time you're 25, 30, you have some wisdom, maturity to look at your life in a more sensible manner. A lot of people do not have that capability by the time they're retired also. So the importance of this confidence and its graduation into wisdom, where you make sensible plan. So what we say, understanding your core competence and moving forward. What India has achieved in 30 years, India has gone through all these stages. We didn't have freedoms. Our freedoms are still not complete. Our freedoms came gradually, from BSE to NSE to controller capital issue to SEBI and whatnot. And then today what we have achieved is extraordinary. So it's like, see, a Reliance which was struggling in the late 80s to a Reliance which was confident, and then whatever happened, half of Reliance vanished. Growth gives you an opportunity of two kinds, of dominance or of greatness.
Dominance
and greatness, right? So if you look at the world powers, England, did it become great, or it became dominant? We have never thought of England as a great country. As a colonial power, they were huge, they were dominant, the sun did not set, but did they achieve greatness? US, we a lot more associate greatness to US for its open policies, this, that, etc. But of late, what is happening about US also is, so this desire to dominate as a result of your having assimilated growth, having understood growth, comes so naturally. The desire for greatness is a completely different phenomenon. And some of the private discussions, I will not quote in detail, but say two houses, as Reliance phenomenon was happening. And the stories I heard at Reliance when some other phenomenon were happening, you can guess, but I won't mention. That, what was their reaction? So I was a party, sometimes involved to some extent, sometimes from a distance, because a lot of people came to us. ये धीरू भाई ने कर लिया ना, वो हमको भी करना है. So मैंने इतना कमा लिया, and without solidity you want to go for growth because you were dominant once. You hate losing your dominance, from Orche to several polyester stories. And so we have seen this phenomenon all the time. I gave you the stories of the big powers. That how dominance is mistaken for greatness, it doesn't happen. Which country would you associate greatness with? Then I'll come to which companies you associate greatness with. Singapore? Already? Great. And why India? See how we distinguish between dominant power and greatness. The point is that. Have you thought of Switzerland? How little we know about Switzerland, how little we know about Sweden, how little we know about some of the emerging European countries like Estonia. How many people know about the turnaround in Greece and Portugal and countries like that? How many people know about the turnaround in Greece and Portugal? Right in the 2008-9 crisis, they were the pigs. They brought the world down. And some of these countries have turned around. So, greatness has no competition. Dominance has a lot of competition. So if it's just that, if you understand that when you lose, you forget the desire to be dominant. So when I had discussions with Tatas and Birlas, whose relative size had become small compared to Reliance, they had zero envy, zero desire to go ahead of Reliance. It was extraordinary. They said, no, their path is different, we don't know, we will be at our space. Particularly Kumar Mangalam Birla, when he took charge, his size was so small. So I think I have seen this story play out. I mentioned Reserve Bank of India, that how you lost out, and then how you went for greatness. Today, Reserve Bank of India is considered one of the best central banks in the world, and what they're going to do now with payment systems. One of the first phase one of CBDC, a central bank created digital currency, has been launched, and they're preparing to launch retail. I have some involvement in it. Has been extraordinary.
Also been involved with iSpirit, that amazing set of people.
So I think I've been speaking for much longer than I had thought. But so I've seen this graduation in us also, for example, as investors, and how I think very early we started feeling that we are the trustees of our capital. Because Nimish feels the same way, that it is not that we created all this wealth, it just happened to us. So we should be trustees. And some of you may be fiduciaries here. So when that fiduciary feeling comes, risk aversion comes. And when risk aversion comes, the importance of values grows up tremendously. So because of our own culture, our heritage at home, and then this sense that came into us, our desire to not to be in competition, not to be in any profile, to keep away from profile, just do our work, owe it all to luck, and then make it last and make it good for people. That kind of phenomenon sets in. That kind of phenomenon sets in companies also. Say Mr. Narayan Murthy, having created Infosys, he so much wanted to get away from it. And maybe prematurely, maybe the succession was not planned well, but how this desire to get away is a part of greatness. How desire to obliterate oneself and just let values take things forward comes in. India today is poised, and we mentioned iSpirit, and therefore I'll connect it to iSpirit and leave it at that, that today India has this opportunity, what we have done on several fronts, how the world is looking at India, that we want to be a dominant power, so talk about $20, $30 trillion economy, I think it would be sad. The pedestal of greatness is vacant in the world. So as Chinese ambassadors once said, that India conquered China without firing a single bullet or shooting an arrow. We have the chance of conquering the world today with our Vasudev Kutumbakam technology and whatnot.
I think recently you talked about that in US, that are we at that phase where maybe over the next several years, I think we show that greatness to the world. I think the things that are happening in the country today, in the economy, you have met entrepreneurs from 80s, 90s, 2000s, and then through your role in iSpread and variety of other social involvements, when you see the new generation today, whether the new generation of investors, whether the new generation of entrepreneurs, the new generation of people in various other walks of life, you think that over the next 10, 20 years, we are at that moment in history, which like maybe to quote that tryst with destiny, it looks like another real tryst with destiny over the next several years. And how should people sitting in this room look at it? I think in that interview also mentioned that India has always been underrated by Indians. That we have also not believed so much in ourselves. And so is the case with, I think, maybe some of the other entrepreneurs or other people who went outside the country and created outstanding institutions, but not in India.
So indeed, I am extremely bullish on India. And I think, I do not remember vividly, I never watch an interview again. I talked about the value of freedoms, this graduation path that I talked about. Freedoms are so important. And when freedoms for the people, the haves came, that who wanted to import foreign goods or foreign technology, it was, we celebrated it. But a lot of the poor people in India, they not only had limited opportunity, but there was zero respect for their life. Post-colonial India also, the citizen did not have respect. They even looked, poor fellow, I'll give you something, main tere ko kuch daan de deta hu. His culture, his self-respect, etc. did not. So what has happened? By providing all these essential needs of life, water, power, gas, etc., and now, food, insurance, etc., I think there is a relief that I can live my life with dignity and my culture has value. So this cultural respect, it is not a Hinduism matter. I don't have a political agenda, but having worked closely with rural people and remote parts of the country, it matters so much to them that today I am not an excluded person. I am not an orthodox person. I am not a backward person. That freedom is expressing itself in what is called the small town phenomenon. What is happening in the sports arena should tell you that how women from tribal areas, how from very traditional areas like Haryana, wrestlers, boxers, archers, this is India bursting at the seams. This India we do not know about. We think, only Navneet and Vallabh, having done CA, come to Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, etc., are capable. These guys are going to come in droves. It is up to us to channelize this energy. So all the cultural heritage, which has lived largely in our villages, it is going to come to forth. So it's come to forth in music, on sports arena, now in athletics. It's going to come into, politics, and so many. Narendra Modi is a product of that. Vadnagar in Gujarat, we do not know where it is, but he's come out of that. So I think we have a real chance to be a great country. And how we do it? So I did on the Truth Talks, I did recently an episode on Gandhi. There is a lot of attack on Gandhi and controversy. I have no stand this way or that. But I said I wanted to understand what Gandhi stood for. So I won't go into the episode, but this learned scholar said one thing, that Gandhi told Nehru, that Nehru, Jawahar, what India you want to build, in which everyone wants to live in a great mansion and have great cars and possessions will never be achieved without continuous bloodshed, violence, hatred, class warfare, attrition, etc. And what is that world? That world is what we are seeing competition between China and America as a manifestation. So if everybody were to be as rich as American, which is say $50,000, $60,000 per capita, we will not exist because we will have exhausted the environment, the earth, and whatever, etc. We need to build a model that you have greater happiness than $60,000 per capita at maybe $8,000. Then we have only 11 trillion, $12 trillion economy, which we can be lot easily. The second aspect is debt. How much of this growth in GDP has come with national debt, with individual debt, with institutional debt? And we've seen debt does not kill you every day, but debt always creates difficulty periodically. So there's a whole new vision of economics and developmental finance, etc., out there, and this is an opportunity, and iSpirit happens to be working about it. How many of you know about iSpirit?
Oh, not many, that's surprising.
Not surprising in a way, because iSpirit is completely low profile. iSpirit is fighting the second freedom fight for this country. Like the first freedom fight had some very famous NRIs, iSpirit also has some amazing NRIs, people from the valley who saw what some people are talking about very clearly. The menace that the social media was, manipulation that was happening in these companies, and most of all, that how individuals' data was used by these companies for their purpose, but the individuals had no access. They had no benefit of their own data. And then they saw that if we could build this technology and that could create billions and trillions for these companies, why can't we do it for India? So people came in 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s, and now we are a strong lot. And this is Bangalore, London is the Pied Piper. But some of the most brilliant people, those who are amongst the top 10 at Apple or LinkedIn or Google, those kinds of people are now wanting to change India through technology. And why technology? Because technology is democratizing. It works the same way. I want to share a story of how technology is democratizing. When ATMs were new, Mr. Murthy decided to install one of the earliest ATMs at Infosys campus.
I've seen that, yeah. In the heritage, what they call that heritage building.
Heritage building.
ATM, yeah.
And he stood in the queue. And there were, office boys, the canteen boys, some other people. He was some number 10, and he was feeling so happy. He told me, Vallabh, I felt so happy that, everyone is equal. That machine does not recognize you by, who you are, what your caste, what your language is. So that's how technology is democratizing. So today with UPI, today with Ayushman Bharat, and all these tools, it is democratizing. Everyone is getting the same service without, not only intervention, but we do not know these social engineering challenges in our country. So this team is thinking about these things. Are you with me? Should I stop if you want to ask questions? iSpirit has this vision, and it applies to our individual lives, many times our companies, and it, of course, applies to country in a huge manner. So you have all these government policies, government departments, and they want to bring about a certain change at the ground level. It's much needed. They are very serious, sincere about it, but it doesn't happen. So why doesn't it happen? So we developed an insight that what typically happens is that the policy-making institution, which is the legislature, Lok Sabha, ministry, etc., they will depend on an intermediary layer. So the bureaucracy, or sometimes the special institutions like the courts, or the Reserve Bank of India, or a SEBI, or a regulator, etc., etc., who will again in turn have their constituents, people they are regulating, talking to, etc. At the last layer, income, the finance ministry will end up at income tax department or sales tax or GST department, and then that is administered by officers who deal with the experts from the private side, now the people. So the people now have experts. ये बाबू से हमको बात करना नहीं आता, so I appoint a wakil, I appoint a chartered accountant. So all the innovation, all the change that the government intends does not hit the road. It hits an intermediary level at which innovation happens. The income tax officer will say कि ये law है, इसका क्या करना, तो ये से कि इसको ऐसे कर लेते हैं. Gone. Similarly, what happens in courts, whatever may be the law reform, etc., what actually happens between the lawyer and the judge at the last mile decides the fate. So whatever policies, etc., can be talked about, even if you talk to Mr. Modi, he said, "Kare kya? We just cannot reach the last mile." That's how I aspirate, and great man like Modi, I shouldn't say great man in this respect at least, that change started to happen. The DBT, Jan Dhan, they said, let's just force the pace. Let's use technology to open. So the Jan Dhan was the first confidence that they got, Aadhaar, adoption of Aadhaar. And now what we are doing is, because we got the certificate so easily, our vaccination certificate, that you got yourself vaccinated, you got an SMS, you go for a passport, you get an SMS. By the time you walk out of the passport office, you get a message that this will be processed, this is what the status is. What is this? I said people don't understand the change in India. Nowhere in the world.
No, in the United States, they
Nowhere
give
in the world.
physical chip, that chit, and I've seen that with people, and you have to carry those 2 chits, and everywhere in the world in my roadshow, I say that before the needle comes out, I get the notification on my app. It's not happening anywhere else in the world. I think we have transformed from the most data poor country to the most data rich country in the world today. And it's such a transformational power, as you are rightly saying. And you are at the, really, I would say, one of those who are trying to make this a lot bigger and a lot greater than where it is today.
So just imagine that, thinking of this kind, when it comes to judicial reforms, when it comes to land reforms, what change will come? So we attempt change at iSpirit. I'm whatever they call me is different matter. But how not to attempt half-hearted change? To attempt only those changes where we have fixed the last mile problem, what we call private innovation, before we fix the policy. The second thing we found is that typically the man at the top looks at the man at the bottom with suspicion, as if it is characteristic of the bottom person to be suspicious. He doesn't recognize that because our orientation is suspicion, we make such laws that there is enough reason at the bottom that this is an unfair law, we have to find a way. So they think they have a good reason to create those stupid laws, and the bottom level think they have enough reason to dodge the system. Now this can never change. So when Aadhaar was implemented, he said typically anywhere else in the world, why Aadhaar is the cheapest? Because typically when you do a project of that size, you will invite the big companies. They are going to charge you a bomb. Things are going to happen in a very different manner. Data is going to get concentrated in some different pockets because no one else has the capacity. Nandan thought about it. He said, how do I make the last mile so democratic, so undramatic, and I create employment? So we converted the whole process where some photographer got a job, some small man just broke up the whole thing into small pieces, created competition, provided jobs to hundreds and thousands of people. So there was no Google, no IBM, no TCS, anybody making money out of making Aadhaar cards. And we brought down the cost to a small percentage compared to whatever. Similar attempts are being made everywhere. Similarly with vaccination, how it was done. Ayushman Bharat, I cannot tell you more detail, but the kind of technology that was developed was scary for the government. that how much data could be collated at the street level to predict the spread of a disease. So we do not know the power of technology today, which these people, the cutting edge people, know. That what can a sensor do, where the sensor can be installed, how signaling can happen, how it can be collated, and how it all happens in a fraction of a second. So I think they say, let us not attempt, it takes 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It took several years to make UPI. But 3 years back or 4 years back, there is an annual meeting of International Bank of Settlement at Basel. Right? As a banker, you would know, BIS. And 68 bankers, they all said UPI is the ultimate payment system in the world.
Yeah.
Now we think of UPI to garib log ke liye 5 rupees ka, 50 rupees ka, 100 rupees ka. UPI is revolutionary. And now what is coming, the CBDC, I cannot tell you much. CBDC may be an even bigger revolution. And such technology is being built by these Indian freedom fighters. Not alone, but in partnership with the government. And that's only when private innovation in between institutions, they say the in between institutions have got bureaucratized. Entropy has set in. That means the flow of energy in a material, what is called disarray. In physics, we have a concept called entropy. So how to get out of those issues, create new institutions? So a new institution, new category of institutions called account aggregator has been conceived. Has anyone heard of account aggregator? Yeah.
Almost
More hands
everyone.
this time. So account aggregator is what? That today, when you make an electricity payment, you make a telephone bill payment, or you eat at a restaurant, you swipe your card somewhere, you are generating valuable data. You don't have that data available to you. But then there are people, right from your text messages, right? So when you spend on credit card, you get a text message. So people have been collating data from various sources, but that's not available to you. So massive effort was made that will we get people who will say, okay, we will aggregate this data and use it for the benefit of the data generator. So if Navneet has paid his maintenance bill in time, whatever, all the data will be collated. This aggregator will get all the data, and then you can say, give my health data to Mr. X, Mr. Y. Now, can you imagine the speed with which the choices that you will have? Today, there is so much friction in collation of data, authentication of data, etc. So fantastic amount of analysis is being done, and these new institutions, the middle layer, is being created. So that kind of work is going on. And
I was in Flame University, the outstanding institution that you, Nimesh Bhai, and everybody are building. And in this program filled with masters, this year there was a speaker from the Home Ministry, I think he's a consultant or something, Mr. Jain, and he presented about the census which is happening this year. It's going to be completely digital. So you have those green and I think some 2-color forms that a person comes, large number of people don't pay a proper attention. Some one guy, security guy in the housing society fills a lot of forms, people who are not there. Now everything will be digital on a phone across the country for 1.35 billion. And they just showed what data they have today. That itself is mind-blowing. I mean, you can compare any district with, let's say, rest of the country. I mean, number of houses with toilets versus tiles versus a variety of things educated. And what next year when we'll have this year's census data at disposal. So from an investor's perspective or from policymakers' perspective or from an entrepreneur's perspective, it's just unbelievable what we are creating in India. It's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the people sitting in this room can relate to our own industry, right? You come from an era where there used to be an IPO. A lot of people, youngsters here, wouldn't even know that a mutual fund has to do an IPO. What we call NFO, the word didn't exist. There was no new fund offer. There used to be an IPO of not a mutual fund company. Even a new fund used to be get launched in an IPO, and there used to be investment bankers, and he was one of the major investment bankers where the similar white color form will be there just like any other company's IPO. So those UTI or SBI or Morgan Stanley and all of those IPOs. And from those days, we have come to that 13,000 crore rupee per month SIP flow. So you have seen it all, I mean, over a period of time, and what this power that can be of investors.
So I don't know of any, say for example, you think of Korea, you think of Japan. Japan was bombed out in 45, and by 64, they were already doing the Olympics. Very, very impressive story. They didn't fight 5 wars like us. We fought a war in 48, and it creates such a deep, impact and a fissure in the country. Korea had fought a war in 51, the country got divided, south, north, etc. But then, Korea had a big daddy guardian in US. We fought 5 wars. What all we have gone through. And then, we had a government which was whatever, we had government policies, all with good intent, of a very different kind. So we have had real freedom only for 30 years.
Yeah.
And, we have had so much up and down in that we had one war in that 30-year period also. So I think what we have achieved is, a homage to our culture, our inherent capability. Pardon my saying this, it is not to disparage any, but we have seen countries, I won't name them, where somebody will kill somebody because he desperately in need for $50. So give me $50, I'll kill you. He'll kill you if you don't give $50. We don't have things like that. Why don't we have things like that? When we had economic reforms, it took some time to settle. How many of you know of the Bombay Club? Have you heard of the Bombay Club? Again, few hands, you younger people. But when economic reforms were announced in 91, I won't mention the names, you'll go and research, some of the most worthy names you can't imagine, they formed a Bombay Club to fight the reforms. They say, all this is not possible and people are taking advantage, because this greed brigade was working, so they say all these bad things are happening, let the reforms be rolled back. So what all we have overcome? I think what we have achieved is extraordinary. We need a lot more extraordinary people. I mentioned a few of them, that how individuals make all the difference, and how I get excited only by that. When we build Flame or whatever programs we do, Desh Apnaye, Truth Talks, whatever, it's all about appealing to the potential, because I've seen now as a 30-year-old, for 30 years I've been doing Vipassana, and Vipassana is based on only one principle. Only I decide my destiny, nobody else decides my destiny. It's so hard to believe. But the reality is that while what happens to you is not in your control, how you react to that is in our control. And this India's excitement that I'm talking about is this, that a set of people decided to face the challenges, whether it was the Asian crisis, whatever, how Narasimha Rao faced crisis, how Vajpayee faced crisis, how others faced crisis, how in 2008, we invited the crisis. We had no crisis at all. We didn't need to do anything. But we created such loose fiscal policy, such loose monetary policy, which led to huge growth, but it was all nonsense growth. And we suffered for many, many years. So how our individual responses decide, and that's what all this excitement in my life is about, that how each one of us in different ways, by adopting truth, by understanding democracy, by understanding liberal education, or whatever else, how we can, progress fast from grab to greed, not just ample growth for sake of growth, but to greatness, and greatness has no competition. Greatness is reserved for you.
But I hope that today the people sitting in this room have a real opportunity of moving from that grab to greed, growth, and greatness. All of us maybe in our lives are at different stages of that. But I think if you follow some of these things, and I strongly recommend, how many of you have seen the Truth Talks?
Any episode of Truth Talks?
Not many, but whether the Prasoon Pandey or the Avyaktiji, or what you did with the Wangchung, Rahul Dravid, Narayan Murthy, Shivani ji, I strongly recommend you to watch some of those, the Satya Vigyan Foundation that he has set up, and the videos that he has created. And even in investors' life, and would love to hear from you because you've watched investors, you talked about Vinod Sethi. I remember when Rakesh left us, that day you were one of the first one to be on CNBC, and you talked about him and variety of other investors that you have seen, both institutional and individual. How all of us in one life, like as Mavira says, Apaso Parimapa, like every soul has the potential to become a super soul, or you started with that whole idea of be a light unto yourself, Apadipo Bhava. And in our life as an investor, we may be at different stage in our career, in our life as particularly investors, by following that truth and some of the other wisdom that you are sharing, we move from the grab, to greed, to growth, to the greatness, and that lasting impact and think beyond. And some of the people have written about what money means to you, what wealth means to you, how to look at investing and spirituality, the importance of spirituality in investing. In fact, when we were discussing and when I mailed you, I wrote that we'll keep the title of the talk as Value of Values in Value Investing. Because we do these sessions on behavioral finance and we talk about heuristics and we say recency bias, bandwagon effect and all of those. But actually the behavioral science is something much, much beyond that. These are like very small, I would say, part of the overall behavioral science that to really be a great investor and an outstanding investor and a great human being, how can we really evolve in our life? And I think if we take the discussion in that direction. And before that, maybe I think any of the investor, any of the entrepreneur, I think Captain Gopinath's story, I mean, particularly that's more relevant for you because I think the, again, IPO bombed and that particular day the election results came, a couple of bankers just moved out of the transaction and he told his people that it's not only about the fee that we earn, it's not only about the business that we do, there is something beyond that and we have to ensure that this IPO goes through and the airline survived and of course ultimately it got merged and all that.
Deccan Air was an aspiration for the country, low cost flying. Captain Gopinath had created the slogan that man in a Hawaii chappal can ab Hawaii jahaj mein yatra kar sakta hai. It was too big a dream. We recognized that the company did not have adequate resources or adequate planning, etc. But we had launched and then, we don't have whatever we had entered the IPO world. And even before IPO, as things started to, become difficult, 3 of the bankers withdrew. One banker could not withdraw because they were also an investor. So there was only my shoulders. But I said, Captain Gopinath had a dream कि मुझे मेरा IPO वल्लभ से करवाना है, NM से करवाना है. A lot of people had that dream. I said, forget it, man. What happens to us is not important. This dream should not be shattered. His trust in us should not be shattered. So the 2004 election results came out, market dropped 800 points. 800 points, not on a base of 60,000, on a base of 8,000.
45, I think 5,000.
Market shut, went into a circuit filter. Who would buy Air Deccan at that point of day? We used whatever rules, we worked on it, that can we extend the issue, we extended the issue, changed the price, made use, among the early people to make use of a SEBI rule, etc. And then of course, the IPO, we put in money, whatever we needed to do, we did. And then the IPO listed, it made money, and then it got taken over. So I think, see, men and boys, we keep saying. Eventually, when I started business, if you know about what world sees success in NM, it was just few principles. One was this, that when someone trusts you, it is not in any agreement. It is that trust, you have to feel the trust and respect it as the ultimate compliment that you will get. Oh, someone else is trusting you. It's the ultimate compliment. That's how we taught our people. The second thing was, deal with everybody as you would want them to deal with you. And we said, help everybody. So we never refused to help anybody, competition, regulator, anybody, to the extent that, we had an office on the first floor of the stock exchange, a small office. We started with a 125 square foot office. On a big table, Nimish and I both would sit, and my brother would sit. But there also we said, अगर कोई address पूछने आए ना, तब भी अपने को बता देगा. किसी का कोई चीज उसको चाहिए अपने पास नहीं है, the application form was a big thing. is if we were not supporting the IPO from day one, we had a lot of principles that we will not support IPOs of, liquor company or anything that kills life and so on and so forth. But हम उसको help कर देंगे. So with just 2-3 principles, you can build what you call an institution. I think it is not individuals, it is these values.
Yeah.
They are eternal values. They are like gravity, they are like buoyancy, they are like renewal. They renew you from time to time. And you do not know who all are becoming your admirers. So there's a difference between fame and reputation. Your fame, you have to protect your fame, anybody can have because you've done something. Reputation is something when others will defend your reputation. नहीं नवनीत के लिए ऐसे नहीं बोल सकते हो. नहीं नवनीत तो ऐसा है. They may not know you, may have nothing to do with you. When what you stand for becomes something with which people can identify, then it becomes reputation. It's the hardest thing in the world to get. You can become rich, you can become famous, you cannot earn a reputation.
Respect must be earned.
So that will be possible only when you stand for values, when you are ready to sacrifice everything. So we all heard the story of Tatas. So I will give you one from the old times, which many of you may have heard of, how Dorab Tata sold off the Jubilee diamond. You heard about it?
Not.
They had one of the most famous diamonds of the world. The Tatas had made a commitment to make a donation to what is called Indian Institute of Science. And then the business went down in the 30s. He said, but I made a promise. They say the institution has to go up. He said, I have nothing to sell. He said, I'll sell off the diamond. That diamond was a gift to his wife who had passed away. He said, anyway, this diamond, I don't want to keep. He sold off a diamond. And that's how Indian Institute of Science was created. Lately, when Chandra came to power, Chandra is, I think, one of the toughest jobs in the world he has done. The kind of losses they had that dispute with Docomo, some of you may remember.
Tata Docomo, yeah.
Tata Docomo. And they said, Tata had agreed to buy at this price, that price, and that was being contested. Chandra said, nothing doing. Whatever we promised, we'll pay. I have done the math. What Tatas have borne after Chandra came to the position, 60,000 crores of losses from past acquisitions, telecom, power deals, the mega UMPP and whatnot. But look what has happened to the group after that. They are going to be supremely profitable, cash guzzling machine. And this is all the values. So I had given an interview when Chandra's term was renewed. So I don't want to get into it, but I have never seen values fail. They will test you. They will test you extremely. But they are the ones, because, say, I make one more clarification or elaboration. See, grab and greed is all individual. Mauka mila le liya aur chahiye. When it comes to growth, suddenly from you yourself, you need many more mechanisms. Oh, I have to hire people. I can't just hire people, I have to manage people. I just can't get customers who are around me on a railway station. I have to go out and get customers. I need a customer management policy and so on. So I start externalizing from my little ego self. But when you want to do great, you have to engage with the eternal, not just external. You have to do internal, external, and then eternal. And when you deal with the eternal,
so just people absorb this so profound.
Sorry.
No, so profound. So I think you should repeat again that in grab and greed, you're dealing with like your internal whatever.
Just me,
basic
me.
instinct, yeah. Me,
I don't care for others. Yeah, just
then
me.
you go to growth, because for growth, those who are in wealth management have to hire people, have to get newer client, have to deal with some vendor or whatever. Then you go out again, because you're dealing with external. The last point, when you go to grade, then it's both internal, external, and eternal. So that really maybe, I think, again,
So
2
the
minutes,
eternal,
that would be great.
See, eternal has renewal. Yug, you say yug, or a cycle. So Jab Jab Ram ne, Yuga Yuga, right? Gita will talk about how you have faith that this will happen, doesn't matter. It doesn't happen in this lifetime, it will happen in the next lifetime. That if I have always felt that I'm lucky because, a lot of these forces came to me, so these forces come to you. It becomes an article of faith. You cannot see these forces, but you believe in those forces. For example, have you ever wondered, it is so talked about, that when a Taj employee did not think twice about giving his life because he said, customer is king. I exist for the customer. It's not a slogan. It's not a poster. It is in his blood.
Yeah.
For it to be in his blood, it is not a mathematics that Tatas could have calculated. No? Yeah. Tatas for 4 generations, they are the ones. Once I had an occasion to, give history of capital markets to, South Asian stock exchanges, and I researched that in 1908, when Tata made the IPO, what happened? 1908. They did a convertible complex instrument in 1908. But before that, they had made reforms. The Provident Fund in India was brought by them. Pension was brought in India by them. Working hours was brought in India by Tatas. So there was no mathematics in it. It was just that humanity, they are my people. When you have always treated for 100 years them, you treated them as my people, they become your people.
Then they give their life for the...
They don't have to think twice about it. And that's how that's a case study in every university in the world. That how that Taj...
that Indian Hotels is like a case study for...
So this is eternal.
Yeah.
So, well, it's a whole class, and Bakshi Saab may be better suited than me to talk about it. I'm a poor teacher.
No, surely. So I think we continue on that path of that greatness. And you have seen, as I said, so many people, and also while investing, maybe I think the point you're making is like when you're looking for that long-term investment, I think looking for those values in that entrepreneur or the promoter is probably the most important thing. And that's purely qualitative. That's purely, I think, the very softer aspect of it, which cannot be put on any Excel sheet or a screener or something. And I'm just thinking so that people don't forget about their fame versus reputation. Because these days in this world of social media, it's very easy to become famous. You put something interesting and then people will be there to follow you, but reputation has to be earned over a longer period of time. Maybe to get a little more into practical aspect, and I think the first course of your Vipassana was in probably late 80s?
1989.
1989, and you have practiced it for 30, 40 years. I think those of you who are not aware, Ray Dalio, I think one of the biggest hedge fund manager in the world, has said that the reason of his success is his daily meditation. And there are so many other people. How many of you have read Homo Sapiens, Homo Deus, Yuval Harari? Everybody has read that.
Yuval Harari, yeah.
Maybe the story where the book came from. So he says that he was like a kind of a confused, maybe a student, and he's a hardcore atheist. Ended up in Igatpuri, right? And
he took a course in England.
Oh, in England.
He said my career was saved because brilliant person, extraordinarily brilliant, and then he was a history research scholar. So in history, he constantly found that different people write different history. He said, how do you know which is the right history? So he became extremely skeptic about anybody's story. And he said, therefore, I was going mad because he found trusting in anybody difficult. Everything is a story, how do I know? So he had serious problem. He was with the head strings and different systems, etc. And then he discovered money racket most places. And then he found Vipassana was taught free. So I had an occasion to spend 5 hours with Dr. Harari, and so he says my life was saved by Vipassana. And eventually went there, and whatever happened.
In the book, I think the Homo Sapiens
the last
is
book,
dedicated
21st
to
century, 21 lessons for 21st century.
Even
the last chapter is on Vipassana.
Yeah, Vipassana. In fact, I had the honor of sharing a stage with PV Sandhu just 2 days back, and the moderator asked her that, how do you handle the stress? I mean, 1 billion people are watching you, and you're under so much of stress playing in Olympics. And she said that I meditate regularly. And that makes all the difference to bring down the stress. And I'm sure variety of other people have said the same. So maybe I think in that journey of grab, greed, growth, and greatness, you think that's like one of the, I would say, an important tool to have in our toolkit to become a better investor, to have that growth, to have that overall fulfillment.
See, what Bakshi Saab has been teaching for years is, how self-aware are you?
Yeah.
I have a model of people, companies, etc., who have self-awareness and who don't have self-awareness. It is only self-aware people who will keep progressing. So I call world a mediocre place because we all want to relate to outside rather than relate to inside. Our lens is external lens rather than internal lens, and so on. So it is a very painful discovery, but I just have no doubt that the social contract is one of mediocrity. If you want excellence, it's an individual path. And that individual path is so difficult, so scary, but it becomes easy when you come to reside in yourself. I'll just give you an insight. What is the word for being healthy in Hindi? Swasth. He said it. It's not about protein, carbohydrate, balanced vitamins, etc. It is about residing in yourself. It can't be more insightful. That how, when we are externally oriented, you will constantly feel FOMO of one kind or other. Uska biceps aisa hai, uska height aisa hai, uska friend aisa hai, uska bank balance aisa hai. And there is a richness inside which you are not aware of. Meditation primarily is what? So there is this beautiful shloka, Pratyahitendriya vyuyam samadhaya manonijam. Take your senses from outside to inside and recite them, Pratyahitin, samadhaya manonijam, and let them get into samadhi in yourself. So 2 steps from take them inside. So all meditation does that to some extent. Vipassana has become the most popular tool of how to reside within oneself by discovering certain scientific aspects of our existence. And it will work always. And then you have this confidence, if I can cut off for 30 days, I don't care at all what happens to the world. Nothing can happen. I think, the world will be, the moment you die, next minute people say, isko kab hatane ka hai? Your wife, your husband, your children, everyone say how to manage life from next moment. Crying is all that adjustment period. The world will always move on. So we have therefore greatness comes to humility. Mr. Ratan Tata or Chandra or anybody, the greater they become, more humble they become, because they recognize this, ki hum kuch nahi hai. So they are just servants of the values. And this self-awareness is the tool to become a great investor, whatever you want. The day RBI became self-aware that, we were bloody a laughing stock. We thought we were great, but we were caught with the pants down and what not down. We started to improve. So therefore, this statement that I decide my destiny and no one else was, I have seen again and again and again. So those who are great have that self-awareness. When we met an MP Taparia many years ago, when Narayana Murthy interviewed
My
me.
boss, Mr. Deepak Parekh.
Deepak Parekh and H.T. Parekh. I made a film on great masters in 1989. And one of the masters was H.T. Parekh. And what a great man.
What vision that every Indian should aspire for a home. And there could be something called a home loan. A concept didn't exist in India. That's right.
And how many years he persisted until it happened.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think self-awareness is a large part of all progress, particularly greatness.
And you think this is one of the reasons that makes you a lot more positive about India over the next several decades, that if the golden period of science and spirituality is ahead of us, then we are the ones who can really take that stage and give back to the world that the world really needs. And a lot of people, and maybe just a coincidence that we are taking the leadership of G20, maybe the world really needs the ancient wisdom, the civilizational heritage of India, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the Parasparo Graho Jiva.
So I think it will not come with any of those principles. So Professor Bakshi and we were talking, and he was saying that, I said, what is the latest? He said, the latest is that, how much of all what we are teaching is actually there in our texts and scriptures and all. And I said, because it is eternal, it will always be there. You don't know that language, but you're written in that language. But the point is this, that we need a new metaphor. We need to be able to engage with the world with this new metaphor, number one. Number two, if we try to engage with the world as a new dominant force, it will not happen. So the biggest challenge I see, and we are working very hard on this, it may be a 5-year, at least 5-year project, where we say, how do we develop a language? We don't call Americans, that's what you're a most wasteful economy. Oh, you Europeans, you're the colonialists of the world, don't preach us. How we get out of that? How we empathize? So, Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya. How do I have that feeling of goodwill for everyone? Only those leaders will be able to do it. And Modi did it in some manner. I'm just narrating this one part, because I may be seen as a political person. But see, Modi was denied visas by almost the entire Western world. To be denied a visa to someone who was so successful as a chief minister, can you understand the pain of a person? How deeply hurt you would be, and what sort of feeling you would have for those people who engineered that. Yet he went to those countries. Wherever he went, you could not see a trace of that ill feeling. How he was completely at home. We need many times more forgiveness and love for those people than that can happen. So I tested one of these statements, and we said that, we want more growth, we want more turnover. More turnover means I must sell more stuff. I must sell more stuff. That means people must consume more stuff. How can that happen if people just kept consuming more and more, that we will not run out of all the vital elements of the earth? So we have got this whole growth engine wrong. There cannot be any growth, like if you know conservation of mass and energy, the consumption and production must square out. So how productivity is the only growth in the world? How do we become more productivity? How can we develop an economic model in which we say, oh, productivity grew by 2%, collective GDP of the world grew by 2%. Slightly here and there could be timing differences. But that's what it is actually. For years, last 10 years I haven't done it, but 20 years before that I tracked the productivity growth, and then it always evens out, return to the mean. It always returns to only productivity growth. You will have a crash somewhere, recession somewhere, you will always have that problem. But we are not adopting that as a model, and therefore there is ununiform suffering and disparity.
So for that to become more productive as investor is like having more clarity, more focus, and maybe I think a live experiment that you want to do, that to kind of like...
Are there any questions that I must answer?
There are
attempt answering.
There were like few, how do you straddle the desire for business success and a spiritual path? I think this is what we have been discussing. What role has money and its pursuit had in your life? There are few like on stocks that I wouldn't really ask you. For the career growth, what are some of the things that people should be doing? I think you should wait for that next 10-minute experiment, and I think that will give answer to some of the things that people have asked about. I think about India by 2047, can we be the second largest economy? And some of the things like the advice and life advice, or maybe advice as an investor, advice to your younger self, etc. I think it will be better if you have that 10-minute experiment, and then a lot of these things will get answered, I guess.
I think a lot of those questions can be answered by looking at the life of Mr. R.K. Damani. Radhakishan Damani is not only a great, thank you so much, a great investor, but a great human being. And he used to come to our office regularly, first Manik Bhai Sahab, and then Nimesh, and how much of a street, all of you know about his famous story that when he came into the market, he said, I knew nothing, I needed to learn. And I learned from everybody by spending 10 hours, 12 hours a day learning from the street. And then how he built D-Mart. I think in the story of D-Mart, in the story of investment of Radhakishan Damani, and this external, internal thing, he said, I cannot talk. I cannot explain how I became an investor. He said, I know, mujhe nahi pata hai. He hates talking about it, and he says, I cannot articulate it well. We think articulation is achievement. Planning is achievement. So I think the wisdom of learning from everybody and this faith that India is a consumption market, 91 aspiration of the country has been raised, and how India will happen because he had seen the energy of the youth when he came to the market between 85 and 92. 87 or 88, Sushilji, I think, died, and he started coming to the market. So I think a lot of answers, आप लोगों ने तो Radhakishan Damani story everybody knows, I guess, and a lot of it is available. I haven't seen, in all the people I know, he is one of the greatest persons. I mean, I rate him as king of our market, king individual. And so if you look at his investment behavior, he simplifies it tremendously. And he really practices that, sooner or later an idiot will run the business, as Buffett Saab says. And so he got into consumption businesses. Now he's got into a cement business. Now if you look at what he is investing in, he's investing in a lot of hoteling. If you look at his retail model, I talked about grab, greed, growth. His model, he said he does not want his consumer to be ever confused, ever become greedy. It's a simple proposition, every day, low prices. No schemes. He says, I will never announce a scheme because it creates the greed and grab mentality in his mind. So this great man may not use, words like me, but he has absorbed it by empathizing with the consumer. And how he empathized? Because he took Apna Bazaar, he ran the store himself, he stood for hours together observing that retail customer. So that's the kind of empathy. That's the kind of empathy that we have with our investment also. Not beyond numbers. What is the company really doing? How are they doing? How are they treating their people, etc.? And you need to spend quality time. I remember in our early days, because, we were not allowed access. We didn't have a reputation. We didn't have any of the case or name, company, Kothari, whatever, etc. So we had to really struggle. We have gone virtually to factories, met the watchman and come back in the early 80s. कि चलो ये कंपनी अच्छी लगती है, बैलेंस शीट तो भी 1 साल पुरानी है, इसमें कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं है, लेकिन we think 2 and 2 together. So we go to places like Coimbatore, Bangalore, go to companies and struggle. But that's the deep knowledge that if you develop, then you can't have too many decisions. So you have to have fewer decisions, but they all work out.
Move from that knowledge to that wisdom, which takes you to that eternal part as well. You want to do that 5-minute experiment, JC?
So in this, we talked about self-aware. We talked about swasth. Are they just concepts? Is there a practical way to move away from parasth, that means residing in others outside, to residing in yourself? Core self-awareness. What is this self? Who am I calling Vallabh? This Vallabh. Did I give birth to myself? Did I choose my sex? What did I choose when I was born? Nothing. How I look, how I age, I know nothing. Yet, I am so attached to this concept called I. Do you, on your own, want to become anxious? Is it fun to become anxious? It is? But yet you become anxious. You don't want to lose your temper, but you do. You don't want to be fearful, but you do. What is it that is driving you? And yet this master says, all your destiny is created by you. He could not be lying. Buddha was able to convert most people with his knowledge for 500 years in the world. You want to experiment that? You want an experience? Thank you. So, please sit down comfortably in your chairs. Put your feet flat on the floor. That way you will be comfortable for the few minutes of the exercise. Shut your eyes. Close your mouth gently, eyes gently. Sit straight. You don't have to be stiff, such that your back, your neck, your head are straight. In that position, we are more attentive. You have shut your eyes, you might like to take off your glasses. There is no purpose. Your eyes will feel lighter without the glasses. Shut your eyes and mouth gently. Bring your entire attention to a small area at the entrance of your nostrils. Just that little area at the entrance of your nostrils. And observe what is happening there. As your breath passes over that passage above your lips, at the entrance of the nostrils, inside the nostrils. It's not a breath exercise, it's not a breath control that we are attempting. We are observing the natural breath, very different from pranayam, very different from any physical exercise. Keep your entire attention focused on this activity which is happening naturally, spontaneously, autonomously. Just observe it. Observe it like a watchman. Just observing as the breath comes in and your mind runs away. As your mind runs away, smile and bring it back. Mind keeps running away. Mind keeps engaging in activity different from what we want it to, which is just observing the breath. Incoming breath, whatever may be its character. Outgoing breath, whatever may be its character. It may be more evident in left nostril, right nostril. Sometimes you can't observe it at all. It's okay. Whatever be the truth that is manifesting, that is surfacing in your breath is being merely observed. Breath arising naturally. Like a watchman. not failing to observe a single breath, whatever it is, feeling heavy, light, rapid, slow. Mind runs away, we keep bringing it back smilingly. It is the habit pattern of your mind to run away. We bring it back again and again to the simple task of observing what is happening naturally. Wherever you feel it, on your lips, at the entrance of the nostrils, outside the nostrils, just observe what is happening by itself. Attentive, very attentive, very vigilant. सांस देखते देखते सत्य प्रगटता जाए, सत्य देखते देखते परम सत्य दिख जाए। Maybe some of you, maybe most of you, maybe all of you felt a sense of calm, sense of peace. Take a few moments to wish that may all experience such calm. Every creature in the world craves peace, craves calm. May all beings experience peace, experience calm. Take your time to open your eyes. Anybody wants to share how he or she felt? Any observation? Anybody else? Calm and light. Sorry? So since this is unscheduled and all of you may be feeling the pressure of time, let's understand what we did. Observation of breath, incoming breath, outgoing breath, was called anapan in Pali language. So this meditation is called anapan. In Buddha's path, there was no meditation as such. There was samadhi, that means to be immersed in truth. This was observation of your own truth as it is. There are three kinds of knowledge that we are used to without recognizing that they are different. As we desire, right? A mother says, Mera Raja Beta. The mother wants the beta to be Raja Beta, so calls it Raja Beta, and sees a Raja Beta, Yatha Kalpit, as desired, as imagined. So when we go to a deity, we see a God in that deity. And so on, so forth. In our own greatness, because we desire that greatness, because we imagine that greatness, we start seeing that greatness. And the third is Yatha Bhut, as it is manifesting at this point of time. We experienced the reality as it is. And why as it is and you were not doing anything to it? Because we did not disturb the rhythm of the breath, as it is. And who was observing it? Was it your engineering knowledge? Was it your accounting knowledge, financial analyst knowledge? No. This is the greatest power that a human being has. Sports and gymnasts know this. They have an expression for it called proprioception. Just as we have proprietor, you have proprioception, the capability to see oneself, perceive oneself. Yatha bhuta samahito passati. Janati is passati. Vipassana, V means spatial way. Passati means as it is the reality, being immersed in reality and perceiving it. That is called vipassana, one of the definitions of vipassana. And therefore, when we are with Yatha Bhut, the reality, truth, this is our own truth. This is our own ability to immerse in that truth. When they combine, this peace came from nowhere. It was not suggested. I was asking you to be attentive, alert, sit straight, like a watchman. There was no suggestion of peace. Peace happens. This is the power of the truth that everyone talked about. This ability to see oneself is Tora Man Darpan Kehlai. Today it is only a small experience. This is the first baby step to a full 10-day Vipassana course and a life of Vipassana. How to observe your own reality as it is. This self-awareness can deepen to an extent where you are able to see every cell of your body vibrate. How you are changing constantly, how your thought is forming, and you see a stage. Let me give you an analogy. What is our problem? Where is this independence that great people are talking about, that you are your own master? We have all seen a garden swing, right? We have all sat on a garden swing. When someone pushes you, and then you keep making an effort, and the swing keeps going. If someone keeps pushing the swing will keep going all its life. But can the swing go on like that without anybody pushing it? So the swing of our thoughts is because of whatever our history is, because we are all born with a specific individual attitude. That's why every child is different. Every sibling is different. Formation, mind, everything is different. So this swing is happening from past times. It is happening from our collective experiences. When that swing comes, that anxiety thought comes, I sit on the swing of anxiety. When anxiety goes, it will go on forever. Greed comes, anger comes, lust comes. I do not even know, it just comes up. I sit on that swing. And then I have friends. अरे यारों को मिलेंगे, अरे यार ऐसा हुआ, अच्छा ऐसा हुआ, and the swing is even harder. We've all done that all our life. When you become aware, oh, this is arising, I do nothing, the swing slows down. It stops. That particular thought stops, starts to lose all its power. As you did, you do not recognize that during this process, when your mind was getting into something, you brought the mind smilingly back, not scolding it, not getting irritated at it, just brought it back to the simple activity of yatha bhut, reality as it is happening. Slowly you can become your own master. And I said, Saans dekhte dekhte, your satya pragatata jai. You know, your reality is manifesting, constantly manifesting throughout your life, whether you know it or not. Do you breathe? Or breath happens to you? How many times do you think breath happens to me? Have you ever thought in your life that breath happens to me? You always think we breathe. Such a big myth we live in. If I breathe, why would I stop breathing? I don't breathe. Breath happens to me. Last thing. Did your breath remain the same throughout or it changed? Why did it change? You were so still. Why was it changing all the time? And then what disturbed the peace? Why your breath changes? You feel the peace and then again it changes. That means where does the anxiety come from? Your mind is constantly changing. And your mind directly affects your breath. Now, once you make this connection by practicing this, I recommend that you take a full training session with Acharya Goenka. It's available on Anapan with SN Goenka on YouTube. There's a 20-minute session. Take that 20-minute session from him. And then you can practice it 10 minutes morning, 10 minutes evening. It'll make a phenomenal difference in your life. Phenomenal. You have to experience it. Do it for 1 month. 10-minute morning, 10-minute evening. Now you have caught the monkey by the tail. Your mind is a monkey jumping here, jumping there. Now you know, oh, when the monkey jumps, my breath changes. As you practice this, throughout the day, any event happens, you observe your breath. Oh, breath is changing. My breath is very rapid. I am out of control. I am not doing anything. I am not deciding now. You watch, observe your breath for a few breaths, 4, 5 breaths. Your mind starts becoming still. The reality will start. You'll suddenly see a solution. Suddenly that anger or whatever emotion will start melting down. You have to try it to observe it. Why people, when they go to a Vipassana, most people come back raving about it. But you don't practice it, it is only when you practice. Like a yoga session, like any skill. This is the ultimate skill, the ultimate power of proprioception that we have. That's how all Indian masters, all Indian knowledge, each one of Indian knowledge from Natya Shastra to Ayurvedic Shastra to Shalya Shastra was discovered only by this process. Satya dekhte dekhte. That's why Samadhi was so important in India. That when you are in Samadhi, truth happens. Sthirtam darshayishyati. When you become still, the reality surfaces. Automatically, I don't have to do nothing except becoming still. Last thing. A person who is addicted to lying, to sexual abuse, to drug abuse, to stealing, to killing, cannot feel stillness. It will be very difficult. There are experiences as people practice Anapan, Vipassana, etc. Automatically their life starts changing. Because they like the stillness and they start, without them recognizing, subconsciously they say, nahi, acha nahi lagta hai, discomfort hoti hai, acha nahi lagta hai, discomfort hoti hai. We start getting away from it. Just because we will do arti, we will do this, we will do that. He has told very clearly what sort of person I like. So I can go on, but this is the ultimate path that was practiced in India. Forms were different, samadhi was practiced, the truth within was recognized, and in different forms, in different manner. This is the secret of India. It got lost to India. Today it has come back in purely scientific form. We just call it Shuddha Dharma. We don't call it Bauddha Dharma. Buddha had no interest. He called all his followers Dhammatho, that, oh, those who practice Dharma. Dharma means, is water cold? Is a water coolant? Now you become very cautious. If water at room temperature is cool, if I heat it, it'll burn you. We are the same. Our dharma is what we bear. Dharma means what you bear. When I'm an angry person, am I a Jain? My foot, am I a Jain? I've lost my equanimity. Jain is an equanimous person. If I don't have equanimity, I'm not a Jain, I'm not a Buddha, I'm not a Vaishnava, I'm not a Krishna Bhakta. What I bear is my dharma. This breath will tell you, what are you bearing just now? What is the dharma that is under your control? Nothing else can change it. What dharma you will bear, you will act only according to it. You remember the story of Dominic Strauss-Kahn? Anybody? You how fast we forget. He was to be the president of France. Then he was caught in a scandal in a hotel. When that dharma comes up, Dominic forgot I have to be the France president. Everything will look so tempting. Arey, kuch pata nahi chalega. When you are doing insider trading, when you are taking a bad decision, whatever you are doing, that dharma will overpower you. This self-awareness will teach you this is wrong. I'm being swayed. I know I'm being swayed. You become your master. This is the way to become your master. This learning to be deeply self-aware that what I bear is my dharma. So I may be fantastic chairman when I'm from the pulpit or from the stage, the podium or wherever, etc. I'm a terrible guy at that moment when my value system is gone, and that's how the value system works. The values have to be deep, have to be embraced, have to become your habit. And that's what you see when I talk about people like R.K. Damani. I'll just give you the last vision and stop. I've talked too much. I have seen Radhakishan Damani in number of situations. When somebody dies in a community, he will go. And when it comes to tying that CD, if he says people are not coming forward, Radhakishanji will be the first one to go and do that. He remembers the mortality so much, and very quietly he'll say, "Main CD bandta hu." Can you imagine? He remembers his dharma all the time. So friends, I think we live in an extraordinary moment to be born in the right country at the right time, when such amazing people are trying to take the country forward, when we have this amazing period in history of mankind where spirituality is expanding day by day in many, many forms. It doesn't matter. Going within is spirituality, period. You change your direction, your results will start changing from external to internal. So there are so many things that are working in your favor. Adopting those values is a favor to ourselves. It is not complying with some regulator, complying with the company code. Values protect you, values nurse you. You just love practicing. And then you have practices, one practice I gave you, there may be other practices. I have found this most beneficial. I am doing a session on introducing Vipassana, entire Reliance Wellness platform in a few days. So one of the top executives, has been in touch with me. He took a course, he's so excited about it. He said, "Why don't you come and do it for my division?" But he went to talk to his HR. He said, "No, why only for your division? We'll do it company-wide." So I think this is spreading because it is completely scientific. There is no ritual, there is no name, there is no religion. May you benefit from it. May we all benefit from it. May we all build a better world, a great world. Thank you so much.
After every Vipassana, we do the Mangal Maitri, which is Sabka Mangal Hoere. So when we say in CFA society, finance must be for the ultimate good of the society, you need a tool where you can really practice that in reality. So in all of our sessions, this is the 6th value investing conference and variety of other programs that we do across the country. We have speakers who talk about the past. He also talked about the past, but given his experience and wisdom, it was very different. It was a lot more enriching, a lot more insightful. All our speakers talk about the future, but given his vision, and of course, because he's seen from the inside eyes as well, apart from the world that he has seen, it was a lot more insightful, a lot more interesting, talking about where India could be, what technology can lead us to, where the world could be, the future of spirituality and science. But none of our speakers ever present to us. And today we saw our present, which is a path towards greatness, which is a path towards eternity. And that's what, as Buddha says, Apa Dipo Bhava, I mean, be a light unto yourself. You've been a light unto yourself. But a great leader is, or maybe a great kindle is, which kindles a lot of other kindles, doesn't lose its light, and this is what you have done. The meaning of Vallabh is Atyant Priya. Am I right? That's what Vishnu and Lord Krishna's one name. But today you have been the Atyant Prerak, the most inspirational. Thank you, too small a world. I think on behalf of everyone, all I'll do is.
Wonderful audience. I can't tell you how conscious I was. Thank you very much.